Scholars often speak of the five emperors, but their era is ancient. The classic book of documents only truly begins its records with Yao. Yet the 100 schools of philosophy all speak of the Yellow Emperor. Though their texts are often not elegant or standardized, making it difficult for esteemed scholars to speak of them, the traditions that Confucius passed down regarding the questions of his disciples, Zai Wo, about the virtues of the five emperors are not transmitted by all Confucians. I, the grand historian, have traveled widely. I have been west to the Kongtong Mountains, north past Zhuolu, east to the sea, and south upon the Yangtze and Huai rivers. In all these places, the elders would often speak of the Yellow Emperor, Yao and Shun, and though their local customs were different, their accounts generally confirmed what is found in ancient texts. By studying the spring and autumn annals and the discourses of the states, it is clear that the virtues of the five emperors and their genealogies are well documented. It is only that many have not studied them deeply enough. What is stated in these books is not baseless. Although the official records may be fragmented, details about these events frequently appear in other accounts. If one is not a dedicated student with a thoughtful mind, capable of grasping the true meaning, it is difficult for those with shallow understanding to speak of these matters. I have therefore collected and arranged these accounts, selecting the most elegant and credible passages, and have written this Annal of the Five Emperors as the very beginning of my book. The figure known as the Yellow Emperor was the son of a ruler named Shao Dian. His family name was Gongsun, and his given name was Shen Yuan. His entire life was a testament to his extraordinary nature. As an infant, he seemed divinely inspired. While still a toddler, he could already speak. As a child, his mind was quick and sharp. As he grew into a young man, he was known for his sincerity and astuteness, and by the time he reached adulthood, his intelligence was fully realized. Shen Yuan lived in a time of decay. The era of the legendary Shen Nong clan was fading. Across the land, the feudal lords were constantly at war, invading one another's territories and bringing suffering to the common people. And the House of Shen Nong was too weak to stop them. Seeing this chaos, Shen Yuan took it upon himself to restore order. He began to practice the use of shields and halberds to punish the warlords who refused to pay homage to a central authority. His campaign was so successful that the other feudal lords began to flock to his side, willingly submitting to his leadership. However, two major threats remained. The first was a brutal warlord named Chi You, who was the most savage of all and could not be subdued. The second was the Flame Emperor, the heir to the Shen Nong legacy, who saw the lords turning to Shen Yuan and decided to use force to bring them back under his control. With the lords now seeking his protection, Shen Yuan rose to the challenge. He cultivated his own virtue, organized his troops, and brought his kingdom into harmony with the natural world by regulating the five vital energies, planting the five sacred grains, pacifying the people, and measuring the four quarters. He then marched his forces, which legend says included trained bears, brown bears, Pixiu leopards, and tigers, to meet the Flame Emperor in the wilderness of Banquan. After 3 fierce battles, he finally achieved his objective and subdued his rival. But Chi You continued to cause chaos, ignoring the new emperor's commands. So the Yellow Emperor summoned the armies of the loyal feudal lords and met Chi You in a final battle in the wilds of Zhuolu, where he captured and executed the Great Warlord. With his last rival gone, the feudal lords unanimously proclaimed Shen Yuan as the new Son of Heaven, the successor to the age of Shen Nong. This was the moment he officially became the Yellow Emperor. His work, however, was far from over. If anyone in the empire refused to submit, the Yellow Emperor would personally lead a campaign to punish them, and only when peace was restored would he leave. He cut open mountains to make roads, and never rested in one place. His reign was one of constant motion and organization. He traveled to the Eastern Sea, climbing Mount Wan and the great Mount Tai. He journeyed west to the Kongtong Mountains and climbed Mount Jitou. He went south to the mighty Yangtze River, ascending Mount Xiong and Mount Xiang. To the north, he drove out the Hunyu tribes. He solidified his alliances at Mount Fu and established his capital city in the valleys of Zhuolu. He had no fixed palace, moving from place to place with his army, serving as his royal guard. He established his entire government using clouds as a theme, creating a cloud administration with cloud masters as his officials. He appointed left and right grand overseers to supervise the many states of his empire. Under his rule, the states were brought into harmony, and he frequently performed the great Feng and Shan sacrifices to the spirits of the mountains and rivers. During his reign, a treasured ceremonial cauldron was discovered, and he developed a calendar by observing the sun. He appointed 4 brilliant ministers, who were Feng Hou, Li Mu, Chang Xian, and Da Hong, to help him govern the people. His rule was holistic, based on a deep understanding of the cosmos. He followed the cycle of heaven and earth, studied the divination of light and darkness, and contemplated the great question of life, death, survival, and extinction. He ensured that the 100 grains and all useful plants were sown in their proper seasons, and brought about a great taming of the wild birds, beasts, insects, and moth. He comprehensively studied the elements of the world: the sun, moon, and stars, water, earth, and stone, metal, and jade. He was tireless in his work, using all his senses and faculties. Yet he remained frugal in his use of resources like water, fire, and timber. It was said that a great omen revealed he ruled with the virtue of the element earth, and for this reason he took the title Yellow Emperor, as yellow is the color of earth. The Yellow Emperor had 25 sons, 14 of whom were granted their own surnames and established their own clans. The Yellow Emperor resided on the hill of Shenyuan and took a wife from the house of Xiling, a woman named Lei Zu. Lei Zu became his principal wife and bore him 2 sons, whose descendants would go on to rule. The first son was named Xuan Xiao, who would become known as Qingyang and lived in the Jiang River. The second was named Chang Yi, who lived in the Ruo River. Chang Yi married a woman from the Shushan clan named Chang Pu, and she gave birth to Gao Yang, who was known for his sagely virtues. After the Yellow Emperor died and was buried at Mount Qiao, it was his grandson, Gao Yang, who ascended the throne. He is known to history as the Emperor Zhuanxu. Emperor Zhuanxu Gao Yang was the grandson of the Yellow Emperor and the son of Chang Yi. He was a quiet and deep ruler, with a talent for strategy and a broad understanding of affairs. He maximized the bounty of the land, followed the patterns of the seasons, and guide his people, use his respect for the spirits to establish proper rules of conduct, and developed rituals to educate the populace. Under his orderly reign, his influence stretched to the far corners of the known world, north to Youling, south to Jiaozhi, west to the flowing sands, and east to Panmu. All begins under the sun and moon, from the largest spirits to the smallest creatures, submitted to his rule. Emperor Zhuanxu had a son named Chongchan. After Zhuanxu's death, the grandson of his older brother Xuanxiao, a man named Gao Xing, ascended the throne. He is known to history as the Emperor Ku. Emperor Ku was the great-grandson of the Yellow Emperor. Ku's father was named Jiaoji. Jiaoji's father was Xuanxiao, and Xuanxiao's father was the Yellow Emperor. Neither Xuanxiao nor Jiaoji ever took the throne, so the line of succession passed to Gao Xing. As a grandnephew of Zhan Xu, he was a member of a collateral branch. He was said to be a divine being from birth, able to speak his own name. As a ruler, he was universally benevolent. He understood celestial patterns and was keenly aware of the needs of the common people. He was both humane and majestic, kind and trustworthy. He cultivated himself, and the entire empire submitted to him. He wisely managed the riches of the land, guided and educated the people, and treated the spirits with reverence. Emperor Ku ruled with perfect balance that spread throughout the empire. Wherever the sun and moon shone, wherever the wind and rain reached, all people submitted to his authority. Emperor Ku married a woman from the Chen Feng clan, who gave birth to Fang Xun. He married a woman from the Zhuzi clan, who gave birth to Zhi. After Emperor Ku died, Zhi took the throne. But Emperor Zhi ruled poorly, and so his younger half-brother Fang Xun was put on the throne instead. This was the man who would become the legendary Emperor Yao. Emperor Yao's benevolence was said to be like that of heaven itself, and his knowledge was like that of the gods. To approach him was like approaching the sun, warm and brilliant. To behold him from afar was like looking at a cloud, majestic and comforting. He was wealthy without being arrogant, and noble without being indulgent. He was famous for his simple lifestyle, wearing a plain yellow cap and simple clothes, and riding in an unadorned red chariot pulled by a white horse. His first act was to bring virtue and harmony to his own 9th degree of kinship. Once his family was at peace, he extended this order to the common people of his domain. And once his own people were living in bright harmony, he brought peace and accord to all the states of the empire. He then commended his astronomers, Xi and He, to respectfully follow the will of august heaven, to chart the courses of the sun, moon, and stars, and to respectfully present the seasons to the people. He further commanded Xi Zhong to reside in the eastern lands at Yuyi, in a place called the Bright Valley, to respectfully guide the rising sun and arrange the works of the spring. At the vernal equinox, when the day is of medium length and the star Niao is culminating at dusk, the people began to disperse to their fields, and birds and beasts began to mate. He commended Xi Shu to reside in the southern lands at Nanjiao, to arrange the works of the summer. At the summer solstice, when the day is longest and the star Huo is culminating at dusk, the people continue their work in the fields, and the coats of birds and beasts are thin. He commended He Zhong to reside in the western lands, in a place called the Dark Valley, to respectfully guide the setting sun and arrange the works of the autumn. At the autumnal equinox, when the night is of medium length and the star Xu is culminating at dusk, the people are at ease, and the coats of birds and beasts are renewed. He commended He Shu to reside in the northern lands, in a place called the somber capital, to arrange the works of the winter. At the winter solstice, when the day is shortest and the star Mao is culminating at dusk, the people keep to their warm homes, and the coats of birds and beasts are downy. The year was determined to have 366 days. An intercalary month was used to keep the 4 seasons perfectly aligned. With the calendar set, he directed his officials with sincerity, and all the works of the empire flourished. As Emperor Yao's long reign continued, the question of who was capable enough to manage the affairs of the empire became critical. Yao asked his ministers, "Who can carry on these duties?" Fang Qi replied, "Your son, the heir, Dan Zhu, is enlightened and capable." Yao said, "Ha, he is stubborn and violent. He cannot be used." Yao then asked, "Who else is there?" Huan Dou replied, "The official Gong Gong has gathered a following and accomplished much. He can be used." Yao said, "Gong Gong is a man of pleasant words, but his ways are perverse. He feigns respect, but in truth he offends heaven. He cannot be used." Later in his reign, Yao faced an even greater crisis, a catastrophic flood. He addressed his council again, saying, "Oh, you chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains, the destructive flood waters are swelling to the heavens, surrounding the mountains and covering the hills. The people below are in great distress. Is there anyone capable of handling this?" They all recommended a man named Gun. Yao was hesitant. Gun is a man who disobeys orders and brings ruin upon his kinsmen. He said, "He cannot be used." But the chiefs replied, "He is of a different sort than the others. Try him, and if he fails, then dismiss him." Following the chief's advice, Yao put Gun in charge. For 9 years, Gun labored, but his work was a complete failure. The second great crisis of Yao's reign was finding a successor. "Oh, you chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains," Yao said, "I have now been on the throne for 70 years. You are capable of carrying out the mandate. Who among you will take my place?" The chiefs replied, "We are not worthy. We would disgrace the imperial throne." Yao then commended them. "Then recommend someone, whether they are from the nobility or a humble man living in hiding." All of his officials said to Yao, "There is an unmarried man of the lower classes, known as Shun of Yu." "Yes," said Yao, "I have heard of him. What is he like?" The chiefs replied, "He is the son of a blind man. His father is stubborn, his stepmother is deceitful, and his half-brother is arrogant. Yet, through his great senses of filial piety, he has been able to live in harmony with them and has kept them from descending into wickedness." "Then I shall test him," Yao declared. He gave his 2 daughters in marriage to Shun to observe his character at home. Shun received them with grace at their new home by the Gui River and taught them the humility and duties of a wife. Yao was pleased and gave Shun more tests, putting him in charge of the 5 cardinal relationships, which Shun managed with accord. He was then put in charge of the various offices of the government, and all affairs proceeded in an orderly fashion. He received guests at the 4 gates of the capital, and all the visiting lords and nobles were treated with profound respect. Finally, Yao sent Shun along into the great forest and mountains. Even through violent storms of wind and rain, Shun did not lose his way. Convinced of his worthiness, Yao summoned Shun and said, "For 3 years, your counsel has been wise and your achievements have been great. You shall ascend to the imperial throne." But Shun, out of modesty, felt his virtue was not great enough and declined. Nevertheless, on the first day of the first month, Shun accepted the transfer of power in the temple of the cultured ancestor, who was Yao's great ancestor. As Emperor Yao was now old, he ordered Shun to act as regent, carrying out the duties of the Son of Heaven, so that he could observe if heaven's mandate would truly fall upon him. Shun immediately began to govern, using an astronomical instrument known as the jade-adorned sighting tube to regulate the movements of the 7 governors, which were the sun, moon, and 5 visible planets. He then performed the great sacrifices, a special sacrifice to the supreme God, a pure sacrifice to the 6 honored ones, a sacrifice from afar to the mountains and rivers, and a series of sacrifices to all the various spirits. He gathered the 5 jade tokens of rank, and on a chosen auspicious day, he gave audience to the chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains and the various regional pastors, returning the tokens to them. In the 2nd month of the year, he made a tour of inspection to the east, reaching the sacred Mount Tai, where he made a burnt offering. He then standardized the seasons, months, and days, and unified the standards of musical pitch, weights, and measures. He reformed the 5 rites and the system of ceremonial gifts, which involved 5 jades, 3 silks, 2 living animals, and 1 dead animal. His tours of inspection to the south, west, and north in the following months were conducted in the same manner. Upon his return to the capital, he made sacrifice of a bull at the ancestral temple. He established a system of inspecting the feudal lords every 5 years, during which time they would come to court 4 times. He evaluated them based on their reports and judged them by their merits, granting them chariots and robes according to their accomplishments. He established the 12 provinces and deepened the rivers. He created a system of law, allowing for exile to mitigate the 5 great punishments, using the whip for official punishments, the rod for educational punishments, and fines for redeemable offenses. Accidental and disaster-related crimes were to be pardoned, but those who were stubborn and defiant were to be punished. Be reverent, he said. Let the punishments be applied with compassion. This period also saw the resolution of old problems. Years earlier, Huandou had recommended Gonggong, but Yao had distrusted him. After being tested in a position of authority, Gonggong had indeed proven to be wicked and deceitful. Likewise, the chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains had pushed for Gun to manage the flood, and though Yao disagreed, he had allowed them to test him. But Gun failed, and the people suffered. Furthermore, the San Miao tribes who lived between the great rivers were frequently causing chaos in the south. Upon his return from his great tour, Shun advised Emperor Yao, and they took action. He banished Gonggong to Youling, the somber hill in the north, to civilize the northern barbarians. He exiled Huandou to Mount Chong in the south, to civilize the southern barbarians. He moved the San Miao tribes to Sanwei in the west, to civilize the western barbarians, and finally he had Gun executed at Mount Yu in the east, to serve as an example to the eastern barbarians. With these 4 great criminals punished, the entire empire submitted in awe. Yao had been on the throne for 70 years when he found Shun. 20 years later, he was old and ordered Shun to act as regent, recommending him to heaven as his successor. Yao yielded his power to Shun and lived for another 28 years before he died. The common people mourned for him as if they had lost a parent. And for 3 years, no music was played in the 4 quarters of the empire in his memory. Yao knew his own son, Danzhu, was unworthy and could not be entrusted with the empire, so he made the calculated decision to grant it to Shun. If I give to Shun, he reasoned, the empire will benefit, and only Danzhu will suffer. If I give it to Danzhu, the empire will suffer, and only Danzhu will benefit. I will not let the suffering of the entire empire benefit one man. With that, he officially passed the empire to Shun. After Yao's death, the 3-year mourning period was completed, and Shun went into seclusion south of the southern river to offer the throne to Yao's son, Danzhu. But the feudal lords who came to court ignored Danzhu and went to Shun. People with legal disputes did not seek out Danzhu but went to Shun. The singers in the streets did not sing praises of Danzhu but sang of Shun. Shun finally said, "This is the will of heaven. Only then did he go to the capital and take his place as the son of heaven. And this was the great Emperor Shun. The man known as Shun of Yu was also called Chonghua. Chonghua's father was named Gu Suo. Gu Suo's father was named Qiao Niu. Qiao Niu's father was named Ju Wang. Ju Wang's father was named Jing Kang. Jing Kang's father was named Chong Chan. Chong Chan's father was the Emperor Zhan Xu. And Zhan Xu's father was Chang Yi. In the 7 generations from Chong Chan down to Emperor Shun, his family had faded into obscurity and lived as commoners. Shun's father was Gu Suo, who was blind. His birth mother was named Wo Den. After his mother died, his father remarried. His stepmother is deceitful, and his half-brother Xiang was arrogant and cruel. Gu Suo doted on his new wife and son and frequently wanted to kill Shun. Shun would always manage to escape. Yet if he committed some minor fault, he was always made to suffer a severe punishment. Yet Shun remained dutiful, served his father, stepmother, and brother with tireless care, never relaxing his devotion. Shun was a man from Jizhou. He farmed on Mount Li, fished in the Thunder Lake, and made pottery on the banks of the Yellow River. He crafted various household items at Shouqiu and went to Fuxia to trade. As was stated, his father, Gu Suo, was stubborn, his stepmother is deceitful, and his half-brother, Xiang, was arrogant, and they all wanted to kill him. Yet Shun skillfully navigated their plots, never straying from the path of a dutiful son, and treated his brother with both filial respect and brotherly affection. Whenever they tried to kill him, they could never succeed. Yet whenever they needed him, he was always by their side. Shun was 20 years old when he first became famous for his filial piety. At the age of 30, when Emperor Yao asked for a capable man, the chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains all recommended Shun of Yu, saying he was the one. To test this, Yao gave his 2 daughters in marriage to Shun to observe his character at home, and he sent his 9 sons to live with Shun to observe his character abroad. Shun made his home at the Gui River, and his conduct was even more meticulous than before. Yao's 2 daughters did not dare to act with the arrogance of their noble birth when serving Shun's relatives and were praised for their wifely virtues. Yao's 9 sons all became more sincere and earnest under Shun's influence. Wherever Shun went, he inspired a positive transformation. When Shun farmed on Mount Li, the other farmers began to yield the boundaries of their fields to one another. When he fished in the Thunder Lake, the other fishermen began to yield the best fishing spots to one another. When he made pottery on the banks of the Yellow River, the pottery from that region became known for its excellent quality with no flawed products. In the first year, a place Shun lived became a village. In the second year, it became a town. And in the third year, it grew into a great city. Seeing this, Emperor Yao rewarded Shun with fine linen cloths and a zither, built him a granary, and gave him cattle and sheep. Gu Suo, however, still wanted to kill him. He ordered Shun to climb up onto the roof of the granary and make repairs, and then Gu Suo set fire to it from below. But Shun used 2 white bamboo hats as a makeshift parachute to shield himself from the flames and descended, escaping with his life. Later, Gu Suo again ordered Shun to dig a well. Shun did so, but he secretly dug a hidden tunnel leading out from the side. Once Shun was deep inside, Gu Suo and Xiang began to dump dirt into the well, intending to bury him alive. But Shun escaped through his hidden tunnel and left. Gu Suo and Xiang rejoiced, believing Shun was dead. Xiang said, "I was the one who came up with this plan." He and his parents then divided Shun's possessions, with Shang declaring, "I will take Shun's wives, Yao's 2 daughters, and his zither. The cattle, sheep, and the granary would go to our parents." Shang then moved into Shun's palace and began to play his zither. But Shun returned. When Shang saw him, he was first shocked and then displeased, exclaiming, "I was just thinking of you with great anxiety." Shun replied, "Is that so? I'm glad you feel that way." Despite everything, Shun continued to serve Gu Suo and loved his brother with even greater diligence. It was after all this that Yao tested Shun in charge of the 5 cardinal relationships and all government offices, and found that he could bring order to them all. During Shun's reign, he brought order to the government by appointing the most capable men to office. In ancient times, the house of Gaoyang had 8 talented descendants, who were a benefit to the world. They were called the 8 virtuous. The house of Gaoxing also had 8 talented descendants. They were called the 8 talented. For generations, these 16 clans passed down their fine qualities and maintained their great reputations. Yet during the time of Yao, he had not been able to employ them. Shun, however, appointed the 8 virtuous to manage the land and its works, and all affairs proceeded in their proper season. He appointed the 8 talented to spread the 5 teachings throughout the 4 quarters of the empire. A father must be righteous. A mother must be compassionate. An elder brother must be friendly. A younger brother must be respectful. And a son must be filial. With this, harmony was established within the home and order throughout society. He also dealt with the 4 evils, 4 notoriously wicked figures who had troubled the empire for generations. The clan of Di Hong had a worthless son who suppressed righteousness and harbored criminals and reveled in wicked deeds. The empire called him Hun Dun. Then there was the clan of Shao Hao, which had a worthless son who destroyed faith, hated loyalty, and praised evil words. The empire called him Chongqi. Next was the clan of Zhuan Xu, which had a worthless son who was stubborn, unteachable, and did not understand good words. The empire called him Tao Wu. For generations, these 3 clans were a constant worry, and even Emperor Yao had not been able to get rid of them. Finally, there was the clan of Jing Yun, which had a worthless son who was gluttonous for food and greedy for bribes. The empire called him Tao Tie. The people despised him and compared him to the other 3 evils. When Shun began receiving guests at the 4 main gates of the capital, he banished these 4 evil clans to the distant frontiers of the empire to live among the barbarians and ward off evil mountain spirits. With the 4 evils gone, the gates to the capital were thrown open, for it was said there were no longer wicked men to fear. Shun entered the great forest at the foot of the mountains. And though fierce winds, thunder, and rain swept through, he did not get lost. It was then that Yao knew Shun was truly worthy of being entrusted with the empire. As Yao grew old, he ordered Shun to act as regent, carrying out the duties of the Son of Heaven and going on tours of inspection. Shun was employed in service for 20 years before Yao made him regent. He served as regent for 8 years before Yao died. After the 3-year mourning period was complete, he offered the throne to Danzhu, but the empire came to Shun instead. A group of capable men had all been employed since the time of Yao, but had not yet been assigned specific duties. These men were Yu, Gao Tao, Xie, Hou Ji, Bo Yi, Kui, Long, Cui, Yi, and Pen Zu. Shun then went to the temple of the cultured ancestor, consulted with the chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains, and opened the 4 gates of his capital to ensure he could be a clear set of eyes and ears for all 4 corners of the land. He commanded the 12 pastors to discuss the virtues of an emperor, to act with generosity, and to keep flatterers at a distance, so that even the barbarian tribes would submit. Shun then asked the chiefs, "Is there anyone who can exert himself and perform great works for Yao, who I can put in a high office?" They all replied, "Yu is the minister of works. He can bring glory to the emperor's achievements." Shun said, "Ah, yes, Yu, you shall regulate the water and the land. You must be diligent in this task." Yu bowed his head to the ground and yielded the honor to Qi, Xie, and Gao Tao. But Shun said, "Yes, I agree. You should do it. Now go." Shun then said, "Qi, the people are beginning to starve. You shall be known as Hou Ji, the minister of agriculture. Go and sow the 100 grains in their seasons." He continued, "Xie, the people are not close to one another, and the 5 cardinal relationships are not respected. You shall be the minister of the masses. Go and respectfully spread the 5 teachings, and do so with generosity." Shun continued his appointments, saying, "Gao Tao, the barbarian tribes are disturbing our lands, and there are robbers, thieves, and traitors. You shall be the minister of justice. The 5 great punishments must be applied with submission, and for each of the 5 punishments, there are 3 places they can be carried out. For the 5 forms of exile, there are regulations, and for each of those, there are 3 places of residence. Only by being clear in your judgment can you inspire faith." Shun then asked, "Who can manage our public works?" They all replied, "Cui is the one." So he appointed Cui as the master of works. Shun asked, "Who can manage the plants and animals of the highlands and lowlands?" They all replied, "Yi is the one." So he appointed Yi as the imperial forester. Yi bowed his head to the ground and yielded the honor to his ministers Zhu Hu and Xiong Pi. Shun said, "Go, you are the right man for the job." And so he appointed Zhu Hu and Xiong Pi as Yi's assistants. Shun then said, "Oh, chiefs of the 4 sacred mountains, is there anyone who can preside over our 3 great ceremonies?" They all replied, "Bo Yi is the one." Shun said, "Ah, Bo Yi, I appoint you as the minister of ceremonies. Day and night be reverent, be upright, and pure in your duties." Bo Yi yielded the honor to Kui and Long. But Shun said, "Yes, they too have their roles. I appoint Kui as the director of music, to teach the children of our nobles. Let him be upright but gentle, generous but firm, strong without being oppressive, and straightforward without being arrogant. Poetry expresses intent. Song prolongs the words. The notes follow the melody, and the pitch pipes harmonize the notes. When the 8 kinds of instruments are in harmony and do not overshadow one another, then gods and men will be brought into accord." Kui replied, "Oh, yes, when I strike the chime stones, the 100 beasts begin to dance." Shun continued, "Long, I detest slanderous words and false deeds that alarm my people. I appoint you as the minister of communications. Day and night, you will issue my commands and receive reports. You must be trustworthy." Finally, Shun addressed them all. "Oh, you 22 men, be reverent, and in this way you will assist in the work of heaven." He established a system where the performance of his official was examined every 3 years. After 3 examinations, he would either dismiss or promote them. Under this system, the achievements of all of the officials, near and far, flourished. he also subdued the rebellious Sanmiao tribes in the north. These 22 men all achieved great merit. Gao Tao served as the minister of justice, and his judgments were so fair that the people all submitted to the truth of his verdicts. Bo Yi served as the minister of ceremonies, and both the nobles and the commoners became yielding and polite. Cui served as the master of works, and the 100 craftsmen all performed their tasks well. Yi served as the imperial forester, and the mountains and wetlands were made productive. Qi served as the minister of agriculture, and the 100 grains flourished in their seasons. Xie served as the minister of masses, and the people became affectionate and harmonious. Long served as the minister of communications, and people from distant lands came to court. The 12 pastors performed their duties, and none of the 9 provinces dared to defy the central authority. But the achievement of Yu was the greatest of all. He cut path through the 9 mountains, created passages through the 9 marshes, dredged the 9 rivers, and established the 9 provinces. Each region, according to its duty, sent tribute, and all was in its proper order. His domain extended 5,000 Chinese miles to the wild frontiers. In the south, he pacified the regions of Jiaozhi and Beifa. In the west, he pacified the western Rong and the tribes of Xizhi, Qusou, Di, and Qiang. In the north, he pacified the mountain Rong and the tribes of Fa and Xishen. And in the east, he pacified the Changyi and Niaoyi tribes. All within the 4 seas were indebted to the achievements of Emperor Shun. It was then that Yu created the Shao music of 9 movements, which brought rare creatures to the court, and the mythical phoenix came to nest. The bright virtue that illuminated the empire all began with Emperor Shun. Shun was 20 years old when he became famous for his filial piety. At 30, he was recommended by Emperor Yao. At 50, he began to act as regent of the empire. At 58, Emperor Yao died, and at 61, he formally took Yao's place and ascended the imperial throne. After ascending the throne, he reigned for 39 years. During a tour of the south, he died in the wilderness of Cangwu and was buried south of the river at Mount Zhouyi, in a place that is now Linling. When Shun first ascended the throne, he traveled under the imperial banner to visit his father, Gu Suo, and treated him with the cautious respect befitting a son. He also made his half-brother, Shang, a feudal lord. Shun's son, Shang Jun, was also deemed unworthy to rule, so Shun had already recommended his great minister, Yu, to heaven as his successor. 17 years later, Shun died. After the 3-year mourning period was complete, Yu also offered the throne to Shun's son, just as Shun had offered it to Yao's son. But the feudal lords all came to Yu, and so he ascended the imperial throne. The son of Yao, Danzhu, and the son of Shun, Shangjun, were both granted territories of their own, so they could carry on the sacrifices to their ancestors. They wore the robes of their rank and maintained their own rites and music. They were treated as honored guests of the Son of Heaven, who did not treat them as mere subjects, showing that he did not dare to rule with absolute authority. From the Yellow Emperor down to Shun and Yu, all were the same clan name but ruled under different state titles in order to highlight their distinct virtues. Therefore, the Yellow Emperor was known as Youxiong, Emperor Zhanxu was known as Gaoyang, Emperor Ku was known as Gaoxing, Emperor Yao was known as Taotang, and Emperor Shun was known as Youyu. Emperor Yu was known as Xiahou, but he took a different surname, Si. Likewise, Xie would become the ancestor of the Shang and take the surname Zi and Qi. would become the ancestor of the Zhou and take the surname Qi.